Welcome to my next tableside chat about keystone cutting. First things first though, I'd like to thank Crystal Thomas for her generosity in sharing a free tutorial about her technique when it comes to keystone cutting. It was an absolute game changer for me when I found this tutorial, so thank you Crystal, and I'll include the link to her Facebook page as a part of this post. Keystone cutting is actually stonemason's term. So if you think about in your mind about archways that you've seen made out of big rocks, sandstone rocks, and they have this arrangement at the top, that's keystone cut. That means all those great big rocks and bricks could sit there, be really strong, and the archway wouldn't fall over. You'll also see them in churches and cathedrals and anything of ancient times where they needed that sort of strength. So for our purposes, we're going to look at the traditional keystone cut, half keystone cuts, and straight cuts, and how we can use those to make amazing curves and create flow lines that appeal to us. There are many different techniques, and sometimes techniques become controversial between mosaic artists, so I'll leave that up to you. So the first one is cut that we're going to do is actually how to cut one of these pre-cut vitreous tiles. A lot of people hate them. They definitely hate the ones that are pitted, but personally I love all vitreous tiles. I think they're terrific. Now the real key to this one is to hold it firmly between your fingers when you cut it. That way you get control over it. The wheel knows what you want to do and there's no wriggling about, so you wouldn't want to be cutting like this or like this or like this, because the little tile will wriggle around and you might end up with waste that you don't want. So here I'm just going to cut it in half nice and smoothly, hold it firmly and cut. How good is that? Very easy. With the keystone cuts, I do half ones, which I call lefties and righties. And that's because the direction in which the angle is pointing. And it's also the way in which the energy flows. So if I cut what I'll call lefties, then when they are all laid out, the energy will flow left. If I do righties, then the energy will flow right. So that's something to think about when we start putting them together as little puzzle builders. So anyone who likes doing puzzles is going to love this technique. It's such fun. So let's first look at a lefty. I'll put the nippers in the middle and then just gently tilt till I have a vaguely left line, and after a while you'll get used to where you want to cut them. So I'll go for a little on the left and hold firmly and cut. Then we have two identical lefties with no waste. And then of course we'll do the reverse, which is the righties. And I'll show you, as the video progresses, I'll show you how I use the various shapes, and I'll also show you a couple of real works so you can see exactly how I use them in what I'm doing. So here we're going to the opposite direction. So this is going to be a righty, and I gently tilt it so it makes a right shape and cut. Oh, that's very slightly right. You can just see it very slightly right. It's almost straight cut, but that's okay. The deeper the cut, the deeper the curve. So if you just do straightish ones, then your curve will be quite gentle. If you do hard, sharp ones, then you'll get a very tight curve and a circle. Then we do the keystone cutting. So there's a couple of different sorts I use, which is one that's got a broad base here which is great for my 3D work. So for instance, I use a lot of these when I'm doing, when I make my pots, or and also my mannequins. And they're really great. Once you start using them on your 3D work, there's no looking back. Then there's sort of a medium one. So you can see that this gap is a little bit smaller than the previous one. And then there's small ones which are tight, for really tight curves. And we'll look exactly how that works. So with these ones, let's start with the one that just wants a smidge off the side, smidge off the other side, and all of this will be waste. It can't be helped, it's a part of the game. So we just start off with the smallest bit you want to do, depending on what you're making. And we'll just nip that off. And whether you're cutting vitreous tiles or stained glass squares, you're going to have little wriggly lumps here. So the straight cuts are pretty much mostly straight, and I find that with vitreous tiles I might waste about 3% if it's a bad batch. Then do the other side. And you can see there's little wriggly lines across here. So what I do with that, I use my diamond pad, moistened of course, although you can use them dry, but moist it works better and you don't need to worry too much about the dust. It only takes a few gentle rubs to get that happening. I'll do a quick demo of that. So probably about 5 rubs on this side, because it's a pretty good little bit of nipping. And I only worry about the top, of course. All of this stuff on the bottom I don't need to grind or worry about, because the grout will have something to purchase on and you don't need to worry about that. So we've got a nice smooth line, but also it's not going to cut me. So that's great. The other side is a little bit more wonky, and that's the glass, not necessarily a cutting, so I might need about 10 of those there. So we'll pop this on here. You can see a vague curve happening. And then this one is going to be quite a deep cut, and you might get pieces off it this shape that you may want to use. Sometimes you can be lucky. So if I think I'm going to have lots of those, and I have in the past, I empty out my cutting bin, so it's really easy to collect them out. Not always, sometimes. So here I've got a nice little pointy bit for the end of a curve. And of course, once you get used to cutting them, you don't need to do your guidelines. You'll just know about where you want to put your cutters and cut them down. So wheel cutters. And now I'll do a medium one. So there's 3 types of curves that could happen with these 3 different shapes. And you can see that curve happening up there. One little trick while we're underway here is that when you cut deep curves, you will end up with, because this line actually gets longer and longer and longer as you make that that cut a deeper cut. And you'll see right on the top here, I'll see if I can get that there without too much shadow, there's actually a point here. We need to get rid of that because that will spoil our curve. So I just get a pen and very gently mark the bit I need to chop off. So you can see this one's actually half a smidge on the top. Chop that off, and potentially we'll need a rub depending on what your tile's doing. And you can see that instantly turns that into a curve without too much problem. So there we have all the different types. Now let's see how it works, so all you puzzle people can really get into it. For some of you, you might want to end now because you've got everything you want to know on how to cut it. So now let's have a look at how I'm applying it in my work and what you can do with the various bits as you construct your puzzle. So let's have a look at circles first. So hopefully you can see that I've made different colours so you can see the different shapes that I've used. So here I've got a straightie and proper standard keystones all the way around with a straightie in the middle. So you can see that's making a reasonable curve. And then here I've got little tiny gap here, so small spaces. So you can see that's a small circle. Small spaces, small circle. Bigger spaces, bigger circle. So you can see how that works really, really well on curves. The other thing that you want to think about when you're laying your tiles is flow and where your grout lines are going. So here you can see that this one is lined up with this one, so its bottom bit is halfway here. Very traditional approach to laying it out. And if you've got lots and lots and lots of circles getting bigger and bigger and bigger, this is going to draw your eye to it. So do you want your eye to be drawn to it? You might if you're doing some sort of windmill application, or I'm not sure. But think about that's going to add to your artwork. On this side, I've put these 2 points here at the halfway mark, so that there's no straight line like this. So it's a different look and feel. So this one gives direction and flow with your eye. This one sort of breaks it up and doesn't really have a particular flow to the eye. On the next one, I've used all righties. So the flow of this circle here is all flowing this way, out to that light blue. So when you look at it, you can see those points, or the angle is directing your eye in that direction. That might have a real good look at that. But to improve the nature of the circle, I've put the keystones at the o'clock, so you could repeat that one here and you would have just a circle. You don't have to do that. I'll show you one example of where I've only used righties for the whole circle. So that's spinning around. If you're into spirals, you might go, ooh, this is just the cut I want to create that energy in my spiral that keeps going round and round and round. Over here I've got lefties. Let me just move this down further a bit more. So these light blue ones are lefties. So I've flipped it upside down. The energy is flowing this way. But you can see how it's changed the direction of the circle without too much worry about the space. So I have a cartoon under here where I've actually drawn a line so that these tiles are following a proper circle. And then it's a couple of straighties because the curve wanted it. So it's really play with it, see what the curve is asking for. Some more lefties, a straightie, some more lefties, and you can see vaguely it's about at the sort of 90-degree angle mark, or the o'clock marks, or quarter past, half past, however you think about clocks, and then finishing the curve over here. So when you have a look at a slightly, I might need to bring this up a little bit closer. So here, this is what you often see in lots of mosaics, which is fine. However, here's something to consider in terms of doing a fat or broad half keystone, where you just nip off the smallest bit or the smidgiest bit of the corner. And just look at the difference it makes to the curve. So I do this on the top of my bird baths. And I'll put some photos in of some of my work where I've used all of these different things to varying degrees of effect, so you can have a good play with it. The other thing I wanted to show here, so we said we had lefties that show the energy going this way. So the mind looks at the next little row. These are righties and the energy's going this way. So it's like, oh, I don't think I want that to be opposite. So if I'm doing another line, I need to make sure that if I'm doing lefties up here, the next row needs to be lefties as well. Unless you particularly want a particular effect. So think about the flow when you do it. Armento or andamento is a whole other discipline based on Roman techniques about flow. Huge topic. There are a few people who teach it, lots of information about it, but too much for us at this point in time. So just think about how things are flowing. So pretty much they're the basics for me in terms of what I use and how I use it. So it's cut up get yourself 50 tiles or so and do a bunch of lefties, a bunch of righties, a couple of keystones, some straighties, and then have a play. Now the other thing I wanted to just suggest, we've got a nice curve going here. How do we make that curve finish off nicely? So I use on the last probably 4 or 5, just making sure you can see it. No, you can't see it. There we go. The last 4 or 5 on the end here is I just draw a line from the top corner of the 5th one down to, with a sort of a bit of a bend, down to sort of the end bit. I can do it that way if I want the curve to go in, or I can do it in the other direction, that way if I want it to curve out. These come in really handy if you're doing things like long flowing leaves, or if you're doing waves that need to wave into each other, you can do these sort of curves and fit them together to get that look. And then all you need to do, I use sticky tape because it makes life super easy when you're cutting, and then cut along the line that you've created to whatever distance you want, so on and so forth. Sometimes they cut well on this, sometimes they don't. I'll see if I can get it to get all the way across. Need to turn it upside down. This will definitely need a little bit of a rub-a-dub-dub, but it'll demonstrate the idea. And it's surprising, I've also done these just as straight lines from corner to corner, and it still looks like a curve. So then we have a nice little curve on the end. But like I say, it's generally about 5 tiles. If you do 4, then it's going to be a tighter curve there. So if you're doing waves or various shapes of leaves and greenery, you can do across 3 and be quite hard. You could do a very long one. So just sort of think about that as a part of your play action. So that's pretty much the demo models that I wanted you to see. Now, how does it work in practice? This one here, still a work in progress, is the end cap of a PVC pipe that's going to be a garden totem. I'm putting this end cap off so the birds won't fall down the totem pole and potentially die. So here I've used all lefties in one continuous circle. So it's going round and round and round. So can you see how that's working? And you may not have even noticed it until I said they're all going to the left. But it's still a pretty good circle. Here I've used the broader ones with quite a deep slant here, lefties and righties, to make what looks to be a beehive shape or hexagonal, because this totem pole has got bees on it. So I just wanted to bring that idea in. It's a garden pole, so it sort of looks a bit floral as well. That works super well. On a garden pot, constructed this spiral. And I didn't draw a line for this spiral at all. I just cut all the tiles halves, and I think I've got lefties here. So I started the spiral with lefty and a straight one, lefty, straight. So it's sort of a gentle curve. And then I've gone down to just lefties to tighten up the curve. And now I've started to cut it deeper to make the curve go inwards. And that's quite, and it does it really quite well by itself. And then just cut that to fit in. So for a garden pot with a spiral on it, that's pretty good. And something really complicated hopefully this will fit in the full screen. I've used lots here. These are all also lefties. I don't always do lefties, I'm just showing you the lefty curves. So here I've got the lefties with the cut down there, and then all the way around there making a lovely wavy line across my gazing ball. This side I've got righties, so it's coming down from the top of the ball and the energy is flowing this way. Here's my lefties bringing the energy up. So you can see how it can be quite effective in terms of how you do your curves. Also, being a gazing ball, it's round, so this really helps laying on a curve. Much easier than straight bits. So little ways to go to finish this little guy off. So I thought 3 examples would be helpful, and I hope that gives you lots of wonderful